Okay, I am Tara Sterling and I chose to do my presentation on naming and identifying. Okay, first of all, what is a name? A word or words by which an entity is desired and distinguished from others. Okay, the second one is what is identity? The collective aspect of the self of characteristics by which a thing is defined, recognizable, known. So, okay, in the textbook it refers to Romeo and Juliet, which, and you need to come up here. What is in the name Juliet asked rhetorically, if Romeo had been a social scientist, he would have answered a great deal. Meaning of names is something of high interest to a great amount of people. They are traced to the beginning of time. Okay. On naming children, boy versus girl, or just identifying our children and how we identify them. Okay, for instance, with us being parents, we knew that when we were pregnant what we were going to name our child. If we had a boy, it was going to be named Cameron. If we had a girl, it was going to be named Carly. Our firstborn was Carly, so we named her Carly D. Our secondborn was Cameron Jeffrey, and our third one we struggled because we didn't know. I personally wanted to go along the tradition of C names, but my husband didn't like that. So we decided to do a name ending with IKA. So we come up with Emika Stella. That brings me to where people name their children after family members. Okay, each one of our children, their middle name is named after somebody that has passed. So we have Carly D, and she's named after my grandma. We have Cameron Jeffrey, who's named after my uncle, and we have Emika Stella, who's named after my great grandmother. Which these people all were a great deal impact to me. So I would hope that me naming my children would influence me to do better. Okay, that comes to our meaning of names. Okay, for instance, mine, I looked it up on the internet on a website, and it says Tara, where the kings met, also Tara's Hall, where the place where ancient boards says deeds of Irish heroes. Okay. Okay, I found an article, and it's by Edward DeLucin, wrote in 1996, and it's about different cultures and different ways that different cultures name their babies and stuff. Okay, and this was written in 1996, so this year more than 120 million babies will be born, and I'm pretty sure that number has increased tremendously, being that we are in 2011. Those who strive will sooner or later undergo the intuition process of receiving a name. Okay? Anthropologists thought that some groups of people were so primitive and unorganized that they didn't use names. We now know that anthropologists were mistaken, and that the idea came about because research fireworks not able to get inside the minds of the people well enough to understand the customs of taboos that required the name be kept secret from strangers. The truth is that names are part of every culture, and that they are enormous impact both on people who receive names and the societies and give it them. Universal, there is a great deal of difference from one culture to another's in how names are given. Generally, in cultures with a keen sense of ancestry, children get their names from the tokens of family trees or their parents. In some cultures, names are taken from events which happened during the pregnancy of the mother or shortly after birth of the child, and in other names are divined through magic and intuition. In some cases, the name given as birth is only the first of several names the person will be throughout life. When this happens, the new names are given either to mark important milestones in which to look to ward off evil spirits by the trickling them into thinking the person who held the name has disappeared. Okay, for instance, with us, our name giving, us being LDS, is we believe that when we bless our children, that's their name given throughout their whole life and then through church. Okay, well, Catholics do it at their baptismal ceremony, which is, although in the eyes of the church, the rite of the baptism is not primarily a naming ceremony, that giving of the baptism of the Christian name is certainly part of it. Okay, and the priest asked him, what name do you give your child? And then that's the name that they give their child. Okay, now in African American, they have a ceremony, and it's called the Kazi people in Africa. Among these people, children are named within a day of their birth. Their ceremony begins with a relative of the child perhaps a sacrifice by pouring rice meal into small dishes and filling a gourd of rice liquor. After an invocation, a relative pours the liquor into the rice meal while recruiting a list of names. The name of the child is the one that relative recites during the pouring of the drop of the liquor that takes the longest to leave the bottle. Once the name is discovered in the way, they anoint the baby's feet with the meal and liquor paste, and the parents and relatives eat the paste. Throughout the name, the individual person becomes part of the history of the society, and because of the name, his or her deeds will exist separate from other deeds of others. In institute countries, parents must register a child's birth and record the child's name, in which the child's name becomes part of the public records of the society. And this is kept, like nowadays they need a birth certificate to get into school, so that's why we have that. And for example, the public schools in the United States require the prospective students possess a birth certificate when they register for classes. If the child doesn't have a birth certificate for some reason, the school system feels no obligation towards the child until the parents produce a birth certificate as provided some types of verification of the child's legal name and date of birth. As seen from the other side of the name, contracted by receiving the name, the individual input aspects membership in the society and agrees to follow into rules into the customs. Okay. Also, I thought it was interesting that parents with twins, the names parents choose for their children also reflect the relationship between the name and the identity of the simple contract sales. This is particularly true in the names of twins, for whom the establishment of a unique identity is often difficult, because they have a hard time being in the womb for so long together that they try to do a separate identification. They're so close to each other, but twins do tend to stay close to each other. So parents tend to think of twins as a single person who happens to have two bodies, and they often choose names for them that reinforce the idea the twins have a single shared identity. Robert Planck, who studied the names of twins, discovered that the names fit into 3 patterns and that the names in 2 of the patterns show unmistakable similarity. The most common pattern which occurred is 62% of the cases Planck studied was the use of names that began with the same letter. This included such names as Richard, Robert, Ricky, and Robbie, Joseph and Judy, Judith, Joey and Judy, Louise and Louisiana, as well as such names as Paul and Paula, Patrick and Patricia. The second pattern involved names that were different letters but were similar in sound, rhythm, or rhyme. Such sets as names as Tracy, Stacy, Billy, Joe, and Penny Sue accounted for 17% of the sets of names. Finally, Planck found that only 20% of the sets of names were different enough from another to be considered dissimilar. Identical twins who are also of the same sex and who so much alike have trouble telling them apart, far worse than fraternal twins in the similarity of names. Whereas Planck found almost 90% of the identical names had similar names compared to rough only 75% of the fraternals. The point of all this is not that parents of twins are insensitive toward their children and purposely give them names that will confuse other people. Instead, the point is the parents strictly feel that their twins share an identity and hence should share the name. Sometimes, though, it seems that parents are unable to resist the temptation for humor when it comes to naming twins. For example, a woman in London named her twin daughters Kate and Duplicate, and the state didn't like that. Most people take great care to make sure that they pronounce other person's names correctly, especially in introduction. The reason for this concern is that generally represent the misconception of their name, because mispronunciation amounts to destruction of their identity. Like with my name, it's spelled T-A-R-A, but people pronounce it Tara, and that bugs me. Okay. And the sense of personality identification and uniqueness that give names is the heart of why names interest us and why they are important to us as individuals and our society as a whole. In spite of their importance to most people, No, very about names and how effects they have on our children in everyday life. And that is the end of my presentation. How long was it?